Now I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to ask you to express our gratitude to Minister Chaputovich for his personal presence here at our meeting. And I want to thank you for organizing today's meeting on such an important topic for all of us. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome our new Chinese colleague who is taking part for the first time in a meeting of the Security Council, an open debate. We are grateful to the Special Representative of Secretary General on Children in Armed Conflict, Virginia Gamba, for her participation and for sharing her views on the situation on the protection of children in various countries. We're grateful to the Executive Director of UNICEF, Henrietta Fore, and we also listen with great interest to Marietta Kamara and Peter Awen. The things that you talked about are deeply disturbing. They should not happen in today's world. The Russian Federation would like to express its concern with regard to the very difficult situation of children in many parts of the world that are in the throes of armed conflict. The report of the Secretary General that we have before us clearly illustrates this. As follows from this document: the most worrisome situation can be found in Afghanistan, Yemen, Syria, and several other countries. The Security Council has consistently taken steps aimed at protecting children and preventing violence against children. Now, in accordance with Resolution 1612 and subsequent documents, what is needed is a clear focus on the 6 categories of the most serious violations against children, both in the framework of the functioning of the monitoring and reporting mechanism and in the framework of the activities of the thematic working group of the Security Council. These violations include recruitment and the use of children as combatants, killing and maiming, abduction, sexual violence, attacks against schools and hospitals, denial of humanitarian access. It is we must focus on countering these kinds of violations in our work. In this connection, we're convinced that attempts to dilute the mandate of the Security Council in this sphere and to impose the consideration of other issues that have to do with the protection of the rights of children in general outside the context of maintaining international peace and security, this is a step in the wrong direction. These matters fall under the remit of other UN bodies, and the Security Council should not duplicate those efforts. Only by clearly adhering to the principle of division of labor can we ensure the most effective way of dealing with all issues pertaining to the condition of children. Madam President, combating crimes against children is an important component of the range of measures on resolving conflicts and post-conflict reconstruction. We highly value and support efforts on reintegration of children, which are liberated from armed groups. We note that most of the states affected by armed conflict are doing quite a lot to improve the situation of children. Often they require the assistance of the international community. However, the primary role in protecting children in armed conflicts must be played by national governments. The role of the UN is first and foremost to complement and support these efforts. In this connection, we believe that the mechanisms of the Security Council can function most effectively only on condition of a constructive cooperation with the state that is affected by the armed conflict. At the same time, the role of governments in organizing cooperation between UN agencies and armed groups on the topic of the protection of children is clearly prescribed in Resolution 1612. Underestimating this requirement could lead to undesired results because leaders of armed groups could try to utilize contacts with UN agencies, not so much for the protection of children as to legitimize themselves in the eyes of the international community. Mr. President, the Russian Federation strongly condemns the violation of the norms of international law, international humanitarian law, human rights, and the rights of refugees regarding children. It is unadmissible to use indiscriminate attacks, to use UAVs, to use civilians by terrorists, use children, schools, and hospitals as shields to protect themselves, and other violations of international humanitarian law. All those who are guilty of these crimes should be prosecuted following a proper investigation. International humanitarian law contains a very broad set of norms aimed at ensuring the protection of children and civilian infrastructure during armed conflict. The efforts of the international community must be focused on upholding these norms. The primary responsibility in this sphere is incumbent on states. Now, we note with regret attempts to use children as an instrument of propaganda by involving them in all kinds of scripted videos and staged events. Besides the fact that this is extremely immoral, such actions undermine the efforts of the international community to protect children in armed conflict. In recent years, we hear more and more appeals to adhere to various declarations, guidelines, or principles that have been developed outside the framework of the UN and that pertain to specific humanitarian aspects. We believe that the participation of states in these documents is a matter of their discretion. At the same time, we'd like to underscore that such declarations, guidelines, and principles cannot replace, amend, or elaborate upon the universally recognized norms of international humanitarian law. The Russian Federation supports the activity of the Special Representative of the Secretary General on Children and Armed Conflicts. Your active and unwavering position in the area of protecting children, your efforts to maintain a constructive dialogue with the states involved makes it possible to achieve notable success. Also, we note your impartial and objective approach in identifying and gathering reliable information on violations against children, which are reflected in the report of the Secretary General. This information is always carefully examined by us and taken into account in our further work. We call on all members of the Security Council of the UN to continue constructively cooperating with the aim of effectively protecting children from the consequences of armed conflict. Thank you for your attention.
I thank the representative of Russia for his statement.